place to hide down here. No place to hide down here. Went to the rock, got on my knees. I heard the angels weep for me. No place to hide down here.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans.
Well, that's pretty good when you say that's President Biden last night saying quit treating our political parties as enemies against each other. They're not enemies. They are Americans. If you think the way they think. See, I want to remind you again, when every time you hear the Democrats talk about unity, like he was doing in that speech, he really means uniformity. We're all Americans, if you accept what we're doing over here. I mean, it's a great platitude. It's something we should all subscribe to recognize that we are all Americans. Sometimes what it takes, though, to really galvanize us, you want to see it happen again. But what it really takes in today's world would be something like a 9/11. On that day, Americans, black, white, men, women, transgender, different religions, including Muslim, if they were American and they were here to become an American or already assimilated, they were Americans first. Political party, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, all pushed to the side. Americans. And that's why I push constantly on this program, the closing remarks always, to remember our pledge. One nation. One nation. And the part I emphasize, under God. But sometimes you have to have something like that. Now, when World War II happened, we didn't have all the dissension and the battles and so forth going on. It wasn't publicized mainly because we didn't have all the live stream and the various networks. But there was still a lot of dissension in the nation. And yes, make no mistake, there was a lot of racial division and there was a lot of Jim Crow activity, for sure. And people were being not given opportunities either because of race, color of their skin, or religion. So I'm not going to not deny that it didn't happen then. But again, at that point, it galvanized us. Then, unfortunately, kind of blew that to an extent when we take in black recruits and we won't let them do what they really want to do and become the best. So we let them form their own units because they didn't put blacks and whites together for a period of time. Therefore, you had the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, an amazing story, a historical legacy of black men flying planes when a lot of others are saying, well, they can't even get the car in park. And there was a sad time. But really, it did help kind of pull us together, and we learned from it. We've lost a lot of learning since then, unfortunately. But when I heard Biden say unity, then he went on to say, well, he's talking about bringing us all together, and he starts planning landmines, and one of them being January 6th. As he brings up, it is the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. I'm going to break that down in more detail for you in just a few moments. But when he was talking about January 6th, he was alluding to the fact that it was white supremacists that carried that out. So you heard him say, if you're Trump supporters, I understand losing. I've done it before. So he didn't want to really call them you guys who supported Trump and didn't believe the election was true. He just wanted to label all these white supremacists. But if you voted for Trump, you're probably a white supremacist. If you still don't believe the election was fully valid, and there are a lot of questions about it, and there's still in Arizona right now, they're looking at election machines. They continue doing that. But if you have any of those and you fit in the same group, you just were not in the Capitol on January 6th, but you're all kind of that same thing. That question got raised of Vice President Harris based on what Biden said last night. Listen to Vice President Harris's response.
He spoke what we know from the intelligence community. One of the greatest threats to our national security is domestic terrorism manifested by white supremacists. And so these are issues that we must confront. And it does not help to heal our country, to unify us as a people, to ignore the realities of that. And I think the president has been outstanding and a real national leader on the issue of saying, let's confront the realities and let's deal with it, knowing we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And the idea is that we want to unify the country, but not without speaking truth and requiring accountability as appropriate.
I'm going to agree with a lot of that. We need to have accountability where appropriate. But you know, and I know, and they know, inside their ranks are those on the left who clearly believe if you didn't vote for Biden, you're a white supremacist. Certainly if you didn't vote for Obama, simply because of color of skin more than anything else. But Biden's remarks last night, I'm looking at the way this was written up, and this is the Wall Street Journal. And this again ticks me off because it's a false story. It's an out-and-out lie as it appeared in the Wall Street Journal. Let me read you one part of it. They were quoting Biden referencing the January 6th Capitol riot, and he said lives were put at risk, many of your lives. Well, you only had the folks on the side of the Capitol and those who went in that might have been considered at risk at that point, but I'll accept the general approach. He said lives were lost. Okay. But how is the question? Extraordinary courage was summoned. We saw some of that, particularly with one of the Capitol Hill guards leading members that were coming in and yelling and shouting, kind of having them chase him and led them away from where many members of Congress were gathered. But then the Wall Street Journal, the way it's written, listen, please listen closely. 5 people were killed during the riot. That's not right. It's a flat lie. There were not 5 people killed. Killed means their life was taken from them by an act of some type, generally violent, not even an accident. And, of course, one of them, for a time, we thought the Capitol guard, Brian Sicknick, who died, they weren't sure what happened. We were told that he got hit over the head with a fire extinguisher and led to a massive concussion, and he later died of that. And yet he's at the police station later and talking to his brother on the phone, said, no, I'm fine. I didn't get hit by anything. I got some bear spray in my face, big deal. But he did later that night have 1 or 2 strokes. Now, you could tie it to what the activity was that day compared to what his normal duties would have been. And again, I'm not going to knock Capitol Hill police. They have an important job, but they're not often in the line of fire of any kind of threat. Now, that was a day that, they had to muster forces and use more training and ability than they normally do, and certainly that the normal, everyday, routine officer does on the street constantly. But it turned out, finally, the autopsy, he wasn't killed either. There were other deaths, health-related. The only one that got killed, was the woman who climbed through the open window trying to get into the chamber. She had a backpack on. A Capitol Hill police officer saw her. He thought, I don't know what she got in the backpack. I can't let her in. And he fired 1 shot and killed her. This is the Wall Street Journal. 5 people were killed. It's a lie. Get your facts straight. There was 1 person killed, and it was a horrible event. But again, what we have is pushing a narrative. That's where we are now, that if you are an opponent of the Democrat Party, especially the progressives, you've got to be a racist. The question again to Vice President Harris. direct question to her. Is the U.S. racist?
No, I don't think America is a racist country, but we also do have to speak truth about the history of racism in our country and its existence today. And one of the greatest threats to our national security is domestic terrorism manifested by white supremacists.
So she said, I don't think it is. Boy, that probably sent some shockwaves through some members of the left. Somebody had put something in her tea for her to make that statement. She quickly turns it and says, but our greatest threat to America is white supremacists. I don't believe that any more than I would believe if someone told me, well, you know, there are members of the Black Panthers organizing again. They're the greatest threat, or Muslims in general are the greatest threat. I don't believe any of that. I believe they're terrorists or terrorists, regardless of who and what they are. I don't classify all of these as that. But when they're talking about acts against the nation, and as Biden was pointing out in his speech last night, that this was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War, let me run through a couple things for you very quickly. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on them later. I'd mentioned in the opening remarks, worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Pearl Harbor, apparently, Biden didn't remember it, or he doesn't consider that was a major attack on our democracy. 9/11, that's not a bigger attack than what happened at January 6th on the Capitol. And I'm not giving any leeway in saying it was acceptable. I'm just saying, again, this is hyperbole that just absolutely runs rampant among the left. And I mentioned a couple other things you might not be aware of or you had heard but didn't know that much. You don't know in 1983 there was a bombing in the U.S. Senate, a bomb explosion motivated by a group called the United States, well, because of our involvement in Lebanon and Grenada. 6 members of a radical left wing arrested, charged with that bombing there, and also Fort McNair and Washington Naval Yard. In 1954, March 1, 4 Puerto Rican nationalists wanting Puerto Rico's independence from U.S. rule fired 30 shots from semi-automatics from part of the balcony overlooking the House of Representatives. 4 representatives were hit, 1 wounded seriously, but they all recovered. Pardon me. And then you have this Black Lives Movement matter going on that some say that's a threat to our country. Senator Tim Scott was asked a question today also. Do you think BLM is good for the nation?
The foundation of Black Lives Matter with a communist paradigm is problematic. There's no doubt that all lives matter, and specifically in the law enforcement conversation, of course the focus is on black lives versus what they've experienced. That's a healthy debate, but here's what's not healthy. It is not healthy for us to assume that every white officer is looking for a black person to violate their civil rights. It's not helpful for us to enter and engage in a conversation where reality is thrown out the window, that we have not made progress. All you have to do, Brian, is to look at the statistics from 2000, 2010, 2020, and you'll see a trend in the right direction that actually we are getting healthier and better as it relates to these confrontations. Now, we're going to have more videos because we've been pushing body cameras, so we have more information to look at, and it's stunning sometimes. But the truth is we've had fewer incidents than we had 10 and 20 years ago. So we're moving in the right direction. Should we move faster? Of course we should. Are we moving pretty quickly in the right direction? I think so.
I think so, and I would not say BLM is a major threat to our nation. Stand by, please.